Part 1. The Perfect Illusion. The restaurant's candlelight cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloth as I adjusted my tie for the third time. My palms were sweating despite the air conditioning, and I could feel my heart hammering against my rib cage. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, the formal engagement dinner where our families would finally meet, where we'd celebrate the beginning of our life together. She squeezed my hand under the table, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. "Relax," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. "They're going to love you." I wanted to believe her. For 6 months, I'd been the happiest man alive. We'd met at a charity auction where I'd been networking, though I'd told her I was just there supporting a friend. She didn't need to know about my business ventures, my investments, or the comfortable life I'd built for myself. I'd learned early on that leading with your bank account attracts the wrong kind of attention. Her family arrived in a wave of expensive perfume and designer suits. Her father was exactly as she'd described, tall, imposing, with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. Her mother was elegant, draped in pearls that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her younger brother looked bored already, scrolling through his phone. "So you're the young man who's stolen my daughter's heart," her father said, his handshake firm enough to crush bones. His eyes scanned me from head to toe, and I could see him cataloguing every detail: my off-the-rack suit, my modest watch, my simple haircut. "It's an honor to finally meet you, sir," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The dinner started pleasantly enough. We ordered appetizers, made small talk about the weather and upcoming holidays. Her mother asked about my family, and I explained that my parents lived simply in the countryside, that I'd worked my way through college, that I valued hard work and honesty above all else. I noticed her father's expression darkening with each answer. "And what is it you do for a living?" he asked, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "I work in consulting," I said carefully. It wasn't a lie. I did consult, among other things. I owned 3 successful businesses, had investments in tech startups, and had recently been approached about a major acquisition deal. But I'd always believed in being humble, in letting my character speak louder than my credentials. "Consulting," he repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "How vague." She jumped in quickly. "He's wonderful at what he does, Dad. He's smart, hardworking." "I'm sure he is," her father interrupted, setting down his fork. "Tell me, young man, do you own your apartment or rent?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. "I rent, sir. I believe in staying flexible, not tying up capital in." "Capital," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What capital?" "Let me guess, you drive a modest car, you shop at regular stores, you live in a regular neighborhood." "Dad," she said, her voice carrying a note of warning. But he was just getting started. Her father leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass. "You know what I see. I see a young man who's gotten very lucky. My daughter comes from a distinguished family. Her trust fund alone could set someone up for life. Her connections could open any door." My stomach dropped. "Sir, I don't care about." "Of course you don't," he said, his smile sharp as a knife. "They never do. Not until after the wedding, anyway." The other diners were starting to glance our way. Her mother touched her husband's arm, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Her brother had finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing at his lips. "That's not fair," I said quietly, trying to maintain my composure. "I love your daughter. Her family's money has nothing to do with." "Nothing to do with it." Her father's voice rose slightly. "You work in consulting, you live modestly, you come from nothing, and somehow you expect me to believe you're not counting dollar signs." I looked at her, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her father he was wrong, to stand up for us. Her face was flushed, and she was looking down at her plate. "This is ridiculous," I started. "What's ridiculous," her father continued, "is this gold-digging charade." And then it happened. She laughed. It was brief, nervous maybe, but she laughed. That small sound cut through me like a blade, worse than anything her father had said. The laugh echoed in my ears, drowning out the ambient noise of the restaurant. It wasn't a full laugh, more of an uncomfortable giggle, the kind someone makes when they're nervous or trying to diffuse tension. But in that moment, it felt like a betrayal that shattered everything I thought we'd built together. Her father took the laugh as encouragement. "You see? Even she knows I'm right. She's too kind to say it, too in love to see it clearly, but deep down." "Stop," I said, my voice low but firm. "Just stop." "Excuse me." Her father's eyebrows shot up, unaccustomed to being interrupted. I looked at her again, searching her face for any sign that she'd stand with me, that she'd defend what we had. She was biting her lip, her eyes darting between her father and me, like a child caught between two fighting parents. But she said nothing. "Honey," her mother finally spoke, her voice gentle but strained. "Perhaps we should discuss this more calmly." "There's nothing to discuss," her father declared. "I've seen this story 100 times in my circles. Some opportunistic young man with nothing to his name sweeps in, makes all the right moves, says all the right things, and suddenly he's got access to a lifestyle he could never achieve on his own. That's not what this is," I said, my hands clenching under the table. "No." "Then tell me, if my daughter didn't come from money, if she was a waitress or a teacher or worked at a coffee shop, would you have pursued her with the same enthusiasm?" "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I fell in love with who she is, not what she has." Her brother finally spoke up, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Right. Because her personality is what you noticed first at that charity auction. Not the fact that she was bidding $20,000 on a weekend in Monaco." She'd told them about how we met. Every detail. Including things I'd shared in confidence, intimate moments I thought were just ours. The realization stung almost as much as her laugh had. "I didn't even know who her family was when we started dating," I protested, but I could hear how weak it sounded. How defensive. "Please," her father scoffed. "In this city, everyone knows everyone. You expect me to believe you did no research? Made no inquiries? You just happened to fall for a woman whose family owns half the commercial real estate downtown." The table next to us had stopped pretending not to listen. An elderly couple was watching like we were dinner theater. I could feel heat creeping up my neck, a mixture of embarrassment and rage. "Say something," I said quietly to her. "Please." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Daddy, you're being too harsh. He's a good man. I love him." "Love," her father said dismissively. "You're 26 years old. You don't know what love is yet. What you're experiencing is infatuation, and he's counting on that to carry him through to the altar." "That's not true," she said, but her voice was small, uncertain. "Isn't it?" Her father leaned forward, addressing her directly now. "Tell me honestly, what do you really know about his finances? His background? His prospects? Have you met his family? Seen where he lives? Been to his office?" I watched her face as she processed the questions, and my heart sank further. We'd spent most of our time at her place, her beautiful penthouse apartment with its view of the city. I'd suggested she come to mine several times, but there had always been an excuse. It was too far. Her place was more convenient. She had better amenities. Had she been embarrassed of what my modest lifestyle might reveal? "I've met his parents," she said defensively. "They're lovely people." "Simple people," her father corrected. "Which is fine, admirable even. But it proves my point. He comes from nothing, he has nothing, and suddenly he's engaged to you. The math isn't complicated, sweetheart." "The math," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger, "is that I work 60-hour weeks, that I've built something from nothing through my own effort, that I've never asked her for anything, and that I bought her engagement ring with money I earned myself." Her father glanced at her hand, at the modest diamond I'd saved for months to afford. I'd chosen quality over size, had it set in a simple platinum band. Looking at it now through his eyes, I could see how he'd interpreted it, not as thoughtful, but as cheap. As proof of my limited means. "A touching story," he said. "But let me make something clear. My daughter will inherit substantial wealth. She will have responsibilities, expectations, a certain standard of living to maintain. She needs a partner who can match that, who brings something equal to the table. Not a liability. I'm not a liability, I said through gritted teeth. Then prove it. Show me your portfolio. Your tax returns. Your business plan. Show me you're not just another parasite looking for an easy life. The word parasite landed like a physical blow. I saw her flinch, saw her mother close her eyes in resignation, saw her brother's smirk widen. And I waited. Waited for her to tell her father he was out of line. To defend my character. To choose me over his money and his prejudice. She picked up her wine glass with shaking hands and took a long sip. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Her father sat back, triumphant, clearly believing he'd made his point. Her mother studied her napkin. Her brother had returned to his phone, already bored with the drama. And she, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, said nothing. You know what the really sad part is? I said quietly, and everyone's attention snapped back to me. I actually thought you were different. That you saw beyond all of this. I gestured around the expensive restaurant, at her father's designer suit, at the pretension of it all. To something real. I do, she said quickly, finally finding her voice. I do see you. This is just my father being protective. He'll come around once he gets to know you better. Gets to know me better. I repeated. He just called me a gold digger and a parasite. He's accused me of targeting you for your money, of being a con artist, of having no prospects. And you laughed. I didn't, it wasn't like that, I was just nervous. You laughed, I said again, and I could hear my voice breaking slightly. When he called me a gold digger, when he humiliated me in front of everyone, you laughed. That's all I need to know about where I stand. Her father cleared his throat. Look, son, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to protect my daughter. If you really love her, you'll understand that. You'll step back and let her find someone more suitable. Something inside me crystallized in that moment. A decision I'd been avoiding, a truth I didn't want to face. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time what I'd been too in love to notice before. The way she always insisted on expensive restaurants I struggled to afford. How she'd mention her friends' engagement rings, their honeymoons, their lifestyles. The subtle comparisons, the little comments about how her friends' fiancés all had real careers. I'd ignored all of it, written it off as background noise. But her father hadn't created these doubts out of thin air. He'd simply vocalized what she'd been thinking all along. You're right about one thing, I told her father. She does deserve someone suitable. Someone who matches her world. Relief flickered across his face. I'm glad you're being reasonable about. But that someone isn't me, I continued, cutting him off. Not because I'm not good enough, but because I deserve better than this. Excuse me. Her father's voice turned cold. I reached for my left hand and slowly twisted off the engagement ring I'd worn with such pride. The simple gold band caught the light as I held it up. What are you doing? She asked, her voice rising in panic. What I should have done the moment you laughed, I said. I reached across the table and carefully, deliberately, placed my ring next to her plate. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I gently took her hand. Don't, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Please don't. I slid the engagement ring off her finger. The diamond that had taken me 3 months to save for, that I'd chosen so carefully, that represented every hope I'd had for our future. I placed it next to my band, both rings sitting there on the white tablecloth like abandoned promises. If this is how you'll treat me, I said, my voice steady despite the pain crushing my chest. If you'll sit there silently while your father tears me apart, if you'll laugh at me instead of defending me, then this wedding ends tonight. You can't be serious, her father said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. You're throwing away a life with my daughter over one dinner? Over some hurt feelings? I'm not throwing anything away, I replied, standing up. I'm recognizing what this marriage would actually be. Me, always trying to prove myself. Always being measured against your family's wealth. Always wondering if she loves me or just tolerates me. Always being the embarrassment, the one who doesn't quite measure up. That's not true, she said, standing as well. I love you. I do. Daddy, tell him you're sorry. Take it back. But her father said nothing. He just stared at the rings on the table, his expression unreadable. Tell him, she demanded, her voice breaking. Sweetheart, her mother said gently, maybe we should let everyone calm down and discuss this tomorrow. There's nothing to discuss, I said. I pulled out my wallet and placed several bills on the table, enough to cover my portion of the meal. Thank you for dinner. I hope you all have a wonderful life. I started to walk away, and I heard her chair scrape against the floor as she hurried after me. Wait. Please, just wait. She grabbed my arm, and I turned to face her. Tears were streaming down her face, her makeup running, and she looked more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Don't do this. We can work through this. I'll talk to my father. He'll apologize. Everything will be fine. Will it? I asked. Tomorrow, next week, next year, will it be fine? Or will there always be another dinner, another comment, another moment where you have to choose between me and them? I choose you, she said desperately. You didn't choose me tonight, I said quietly. When it mattered, when I needed you to stand up for us, you stayed silent. You laughed. I made a mistake, she sobbed. One mistake. Please don't throw away everything we have over one mistake. I wanted to fold. Every fiber of my being wanted to take her in my arms, to forgive her, to pretend this hadn't happened. But I thought about the future, about years of family dinners, holidays, gatherings where I'd always be the outsider, always be judged, always be found wanting. About raising children who'd learned from their grandfather that love was transactional, that worth was measured in bank accounts. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I really am. But I can't marry someone who won't fight for me. I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, leaving behind the woman I loved and the life I'd imagined we'd build together. I didn't look back. The next 3 days passed in a haze. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years, stayed in my modest apartment, and tried to piece together the shattered remains of my future. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from her, texts from her mother, even a strangely formal email from her brother suggesting we talk this through like adults. I ignored them all. On the 4th day, my business partner, James, showed up at my door with coffee and bagels. You look like hell, he said, pushing past me into the apartment. Thanks for the pep talk, I muttered, but accepted the coffee gratefully. James settled onto my couch, looking around at the space I'd chosen to keep simple. So, you want to tell me why the woman who owns the Riverside Group has been calling our office trying to reach you? I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Yeah, your ex-future mother-in-law. She's been very polite, very persistent. Said it was urgent family business. He paused. You want to tell me what happened? I told him everything, the dinner, the accusations, her laugh, the rings on the table. James listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. That pompous ass, he finally said. Does he have any idea who you are? He knows I work in consulting, I said with a bitter laugh. Right. Consulting. James shook his head. Did you ever tell her about the business? The investments? The Hartley acquisition? No, I admitted. I wanted her to love me for me, not my portfolio. Guess that backfired spectacularly. You think? James stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city. Look, I get it. After what happened with Nicole, you were gun-shy about gold diggers. But there's a difference between being humble and being dishonest. I never lied, I protested. You didn't tell the truth either, he countered. You let them think you were struggling, that you were ordinary, that you needed their daughter's money. And when they treated you like you were after their fortune, you have to admit, from their perspective, it looked pretty damning. His words stung because they were partially true. My ex-girlfriend Nicole had been explicitly interested in my money, had disappeared the moment I pretended to lose everything in a bad investment. After that, I'd become paranoid, testing women, hiding my success. It had seemed smart at the time. Protective. Now it just seemed stupid. So what do? I asked. That depends, James said. Do you love her? I did. I do. I don't know anymore. I rubbed my face. How do I love someone who wouldn't defend me? She was stuck between her family and her fiancé. That's not an easy position. He held up his hand before I could protest. I'm not saying she handled it right. That laugh was cold. But people freeze up. They make mistakes. The question is whether it's a deal breaker. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Her again. For some reason, this time I answered. Hello. Oh, thank God, she breathed. I've been trying to reach you for days. Please, I need to talk to you. In person. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. Just give me an hour. After that, if you never want to see me again, I'll respect that. But I need you to hear what I have to say. What I've learned. Something in her tone made me hesitate. What do you mean, what you've learned? Just, please, meet me at Riverside Park. The bench where we had our first date. 2 o'clock. She hung up before I could refuse. James was watching me carefully. You're going to meet her, aren't you? I don't know. Should I? That's not my call, man. But if you do go, maybe it's time to stop hiding who you are. Full honesty. Let the cards fall where they may. I arrived at the park 15 minutes early, my stomach churning with anxiety. The bench held so many memories. Our first date when we'd talked for 6 hours straight, the afternoon she'd surprised me with a picnic, the evening I'd kissed her for the first time. She was already there, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked young, vulnerable, nothing like the polished woman from the restaurant. You came, she said softly as I approached. You said you learned something, I replied, staying standing. What? She took a deep breath. My father hired an investigator. My blood ran cold. He what? After you left, he was furious. Said he needed to prove he was right about you, that you were after our money. So he hired someone to dig into your background. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. He got the report yesterday. And? My heart was pounding. And he found out that you own 3 successful consulting firms. That you've been featured in business journals. That you were the anonymous buyer in the Hartley acquisition that everyone's been talking about. That your net worth is. She paused, laughing incredulously. It's more than my trust fund. I said nothing, just watched her process this information. Why? She asked. Why didn't you tell me? Tell us. Because I wanted someone to love me, not my money, I said simply. I wanted to know that if everything disappeared tomorrow, you'd still be there. And I failed that test, she whispered. You laughed, I said, the pain still fresh. I know. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was so shocked, so overwhelmed. My father has never been wrong about people, and I thought maybe he saw something I'd missed. For just a second, I doubted you. And that doubt came out as this horrible, nervous laugh, and I've regretted it every second since. She stood up from the bench, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold despite the mild weather. My father is devastated, she continued. Not just embarrassed, destroyed. He prides himself on reading people, on protecting the family. And he got it completely wrong. Good, I said, and I meant it. He wants to apologize. They all do. My mother has been crying for 3 days. Even my brother admitted he was a jerk. She took a tentative step toward me. But I know that's not enough. Their apologies don't fix what I did. No, I agreed. They don't. She flinched as if I'd struck her, but she didn't look away. I've been thinking about that laugh every single moment, replaying it in my mind, hating myself for it. And I realized something. It wasn't just nerves. It was cowardice. I crossed my arms, Waiting. I've spent my whole life being my father's daughter, living up to his expectations, making him proud, seeking his approval. And when he attacked you, when I had to choose between his approval and defending you, I froze. Because I've never had to stand up to him before. I've never had to choose anything over his opinion. She wiped her eyes roughly. That doesn't excuse it. But it's the truth. So what changed? I asked. Your father found out I have money, so now I'm acceptable. No, she said firmly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. When my father showed me that investigator's report, my first feeling wasn't relief. It was shame. Because I realized that even learning you were wealthy, that you measured up to his standards, didn't change what mattered. Which is that I should have defended you regardless. Whether you were a billionaire or worked at a fast food restaurant, I should have stood up for the man I loved. I should have told my father that his money, his standards, his approval, none of it matters more than the person who makes me laugh, who listens to me, who sees me as more than just a trust fund and a last name. Her words hung in the air between us. I wanted to believe them. God, I wanted to believe them. Your father knows now that I'm not a gold digger, I said slowly. But that doesn't change the fundamental problem. You're still his daughter. You still care about his approval. And the next time he disapproves of something, where I want to live, how I want to raise our kids, how I spend my money, what happens then? Then I choose you, she said without hesitation. I choose us. I know I have to earn back your trust, and I know words are empty. But I've already started. I told my father yesterday that I'm moving out of the apartment he bought me. I'm getting my own place, one I pay for with my own salary. That surprised me. You're leaving the penthouse. I'm leaving his control, she corrected. I've been thinking about what you said, about me not knowing how to choose you over them. You were right. I've been so comfortable in their world, in their safety net, that I never learned to stand on my own. How could I stand up for you when I'd never stood up for myself? I studied her face, looking for any sign of manipulation, any hint that this was just another performance. But all I saw was raw honesty and pain that matched my own. There's something else, she said. I went through my phone. All those conversations we had, all those intimate moments, I shared everything with my family. Private things you told me, details about your life, your fears, your dreams. I violated your trust over and over, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I know, I said quietly. Your brother mentioned the charity auction. You told them about Monaco. I've deleted the family group chat, she said. I'm setting boundaries. They don't get access to my relationship anymore. They don't get to judge you or us or our choices. Because you were right, I can't build a life with you while living in their shadow. A jogger passed by, and we both fell silent until they were gone. The park was beautiful in the afternoon light, and I remembered why I'd chosen this bench for our first date. It was peaceful here, away from the city's noise, a place where things could grow. The investigator's report, I said finally. What exactly did it say about me? She pulled out her phone and opened a document. That you graduated top of your class despite working 2 jobs. That you started your first company at 23 with money you'd saved since you were 16. That every business you've touched has grown exponentially. That you're known in your industry for integrity and innovation. She looked up. It also said you're fiercely private, that you've turned down media interviews, that you live modestly despite your success, and that you're generous with charities but insist on anonymity. He was thorough. He's mortified. He built this entire narrative about you being a con artist, and every single piece of evidence contradicted it. You know what the investigator's conclusion was? That you were exactly the kind of son-in-law most fathers would kill to have. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was bitter, but it was a laugh. That's ironic. He wants to meet with you, she said. To apologize properly. But I told him that was up to you, that he'd done enough damage, that he needed to respect your boundaries. You stood up to him. I'm learning, she said with a sad smile. I know I should have learned sooner. I know I should have defended you at that dinner. And I know that my regret doesn't undo the hurt. But I'm asking, begging, for a chance to prove that I can be the partner you deserve. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone different from the woman at the restaurant. Someone who'd been forced to examine herself and hadn't liked what she'd found. Someone who was trying to change. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said honestly. That laugh, it's going to echo in my head every time we face adversity. I know, she whispered. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to drown it out with better choices. With standing beside you, defending you, choosing you. And your family will learn to respect my choices, or they'll see a lot less of me. She took another step forward, close enough now that I could see the gold flecks in her eyes. I don't need their money. I don't need their approval. I need you. And I'll prove it, however long it takes. I thought about James's words, about being honest. About letting the cards fall. I hid who I was because I'd been hurt before, I admitted. A woman I dated found out about my money and changed completely. Became someone I didn't recognize. When she left, I decided I'd never let that happen again. So you tested me, she said, understanding dawning. And I failed. You failed the dinner, I corrected. But maybe I failed too. Maybe I should have trusted you enough to be honest. Maybe we both have things to learn about trust. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her engagement ring. The diamond caught the sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across her hand. I don't want this back unless you want to give it to me. Not because of what it cost or what it represents about your success. But because when you gave it to me, you were being yourself, generous, thoughtful, real. That's the man I fell in love with. That's the man I failed to protect. I looked at the ring, then at her face, then back at the bench where we'd first talked about our dreams and fears. I don't know if I can put that ring back on your finger right now, I said slowly. The hurt is still too fresh. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. But, I continued, I'm not walking away either. Not yet. Because despite everything, I still love you. And maybe that makes me stupid, maybe I'll regret this, but I think we both deserve a chance to figure out if we can do better. Hope flickered in her eyes. What does that mean? It means we start over. Really start over. No secrets, no tests, no hiding who we are. I tell you about my business, my money, my fears about gold diggers. You tell me about your family, your struggles with independence, your fears about never being seen as more than your last name. We build something real. And then, she asked breathlessly, and then, maybe someday, if we figure this out, if we prove to each other that we can be honest and brave and true, then maybe I'll ask you to marry me again. For real this time. She was crying openly now, but she was also smiling. I'd like that. I'd like that so much. I held out my hand, and after a moment, she took it. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly, but they fit perfectly in mine, just like they always had. For what it's worth, I said, I'm sorry too. For hiding who I was. For setting you up to fail. We both made mistakes, she agreed. But maybe we can make better ones together. We sat down on our bench, and I put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, careful and hopeful, like someone learning to trust again after a fall. My father really is devastated, she said after a while. He wants to know if there's anything he can do to make this right. I thought about it. About the man who'd called me a parasite, who'd tried to price me out of his daughter's life, who'd been so certain of his judgment and so completely wrong. Part of me wanted him to suffer. But a larger part remembered being young and making mistakes, remembered learning the hard way that assumptions could be deadly. Tell him we'll have dinner, I said. In a month. At a regular restaurant. Nothing fancy. And tell him to come ready to listen, not to judge. He'll agree to anything, she promised. And tell him something else. I turned to look at her. Tell him that if he ever treats me or anyone else like that again based on their bank account, there won't be another chance. Money doesn't make someone worthy. Character does. I'll tell him, she said. And I'll remember it too. We sat there as the sun moved across the sky, talking about everything we should have discussed months ago. About my businesses and her career aspirations. About my parents and her family dynamics. About our fears and hopes and the messiness of trying to build something real in a world that often felt fake. It wasn't perfect. The hurt was still there, lurking beneath our words. Trust was fractured, not fixed. But it was honest. It was a start. And as I looked at the woman beside me, flawed, learning, trying, I thought that maybe starts were underrated. Maybe the prettiest love stories weren't the perfect ones, but the ones where two people chose to be brave together. The ring stayed in her pocket that day. But as we walked out of the park, hands intertwined, I could imagine a future where it might find its way back to her finger. A future earned through honesty, through standing together, through choosing each other every single day. First, though, we had work to do. Bridges to rebuild. Lessons to learn. A foundation to construct that was strong enough to support not just love, but trust, respect, and the courage to be fully ourselves with each other. It wouldn't be easy. But as she squeezed my hand and I squeezed back, I realized that maybe the easy path wasn't the one worth walking. Maybe the path worth taking was the one where two imperfect people decided that their love, tested, broken, and carefully being repaired, was worth fighting for. Together.